Hello, I'm Liam and welcome to my March allotment tour. One of the things I love about allotmenting is that you can really appreciate the change of seasons, and that's certainly the case at the moment. This tour will concentrate on fruit. I've been extending the fruit cage and getting the fruit bushes and canes ready for the year ahead. I'll also cover germination. I've sown some seeds already and I'll share what I'm planning to do over the next few weeks. The video is divided into chapters, and if you're rewatching the video and want to come back and skip to a particular section, that's an easy way of doing this. You can see the links below the video. So let's get started. A quick recap on how I organise my allotment. It's about 50% fruit and 50% vegetables. I love growing fruit, and apart from it being delicious, it also makes allotmenting that bit easier, because I find that growing fruit requires a lot less effort than growing vegetables. A very quick tour at the beginning. I have some blueberry bushes at the front of the allotment, followed by a series of permanent beds where I rotate the crops each year, and paths covered in wood chip in between. I have 12 of these beds in all. And then after these beds I have an apple tree just at the front there, and my fruit cage here. Now last year my fruit cage was only 2.5 meters wide and 8 meters long, and inside the fruit cage I had my gooseberries and currant bushes. But over the last few weeks I've extended the fruit cage. What I've done is to swap out the key clamps here, which enabled me to extend it to the left hand side, and I've extended the frame all the way along, which is another 4.5 meters in width and another 8 meters in length. And what that's enabled me to do is to extend the frame so it covers my row of raspberry canes and my row of hybrid berries. And I grow tayberries, loganberries and boysenberries. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens this year. By keeping the birds off, I'm hoping that the harvest will be that much bigger. Starting with the blueberry bushes. The blueberry bushes are only a little more advanced than they were a few weeks ago. They've definitely got more buds on them now, and the buds are bigger. But the weather has been cold, windy, wet. I think a little bit colder than average compared to other years I've been growing down here. It looks as though it will be a late spring this year, and the forecast is still cold over the next week. My homegrown garlic is now looking excellent. They have a really nice upright habit, bright green leaves, and I'm particularly enjoying this because the garlic I sowed last autumn is the garlic I grew in the summer before. I haven't done anything with the beds over the last few weeks. These beds I prepared in the autumn waiting for a spring sowing. I still need to remove the kale and old cabbage plants I have in the beds here. I've got a couple of kale plants in there. They're great survivors. I'm not eating the leaves anymore. I'm curious to see what's happening with them. I have to say I am really impressed with the hardiness of the kale plants. My leeks are recovering. There are a couple of plants there that have already swollen nicely. In a few moments I'll get back here to dig a couple up to take a look at them. I love leeks at this time of year because I think they make a great ingredient to soups. And that's it, the first 3 leeks of the year. A decent size actually, pretty pleased with that. I need to clean them up, make them presentable and take them home. That's a good start to the year. This is my old parsnip bed that needs a bit of care. Just down here you can see some parsnip leaves regrowing on the parsnips that I haven't dug up. That's likely to spoil their flavour, but it does make the parsnips easier to find, so I won't leave any in the ground. I have another bed there that is ready for some potatoes. Hopefully I'll be able to get down here around Easter time to sow my main crop potatoes. I'm really looking forward to getting these in the ground. I don't chip my potatoes. I find that they germinate perfectly well without this extra step. Depending on the weather, I hope to get those in the ground over the Easter period. That may be later than some people, but what I found last year is that a late frost damage the leaves of some of the plants that I planted earlier in the year. This year I'm going to plant my potatoes a little later, so that when the shoots do come up there won't be any risk of them being damaged by frost. They still feel nice and firm. I'm keeping them in a box in my shed, and they have this stripped cardboard to cover them. My shed doesn't feel that damp inside, and with this cardboard on top, they should be fine waiting there until I'm ready to plant them. I like to sow true broccoli that is ready for harvesting in March and April, and purple sprouting. Yesterday I saw that some broccoli heads are forming, so let's take a look. I'm hoping this is going to come out well on the camera, but just there where I'm pointing to with my finger, I have one of the first heads of broccoli. This is actually the flower bud. It produces really pretty yellow flowers if left to mature. Quite small flowers though. And what I like to do is to pick out the first bud, and that will encourage more broccoli side shoots to appear. The leaves look in great condition, really green and lots of them, so I'm hopeful the harvest this year will be good. In the bed covered in fleece, I had my experiment growing perpetual spinach, and I sowed radish last year, but the radish really wasn't that successful. I'm going to lift the fleece up and take a look inside. Now, if you've watched some of my other allotment tours, you will have seen this plants in much worse condition. After the snow in January, the plants looked almost beaten, but now they have certainly made a recovery. They have a really good colour about them, and the leaves look healthy. What I need to do is to come down and thin these plants out now. The baby leaves are probably good for eating. I need to allow a good distance, maybe 6 to 9 inches between the plants to allow them to mature fully. But this experiment appears to have worked well, and in a few weeks' time I'm hoping to have a regular harvest from these plants. Nothing much appears to be happening with my strawberry bed. A few green leaves poking through. I'll leave that a little longer before taking a look inside. Next to the strawberry bed I have my rhubarb. Now I reckon if the weather had been better over the last few weeks I would have been harvesting the rhubarb by now. But what is happening is that the plants have developed plenty of leaf. But it does look I'm going to have to wait a few weeks longer for my first harvest. Like on the February tour, nothing much seems to be happening with the apple tree. It looks to me a few weeks away from coming into blossom, which is probably a good thing, because if there's a late frost that kills the blossom at the wrong time, that can jeopardise the harvest. It is looking in good condition though. There's also no sign yet of any blossom forming on this gooseberry bush. What has changed is that perhaps a fortnight ago I came down and applied well-rotted manure around the base of the plants. I pulled back the ground cover fabric and put a ring of well-rotted manure around the base of each plant. That will effectively act as the feed for the whole year. Now with gooseberries it is possible to take cuttings, but what they do naturally is to throw out branches which head towards the ground, and this is a good example of that. Hopefully this is coming out on the camera, but this branch here has actually taken root into the ground cover fabric, and if I wanted an extra plant all I'd need to do is to snip that off and repot this runner into a new pot of compost, and I'd have a new gooseberry plant. Alongside the gooseberry I have my black currant bush here and my red currant bush next to that. I pruned this to have an upright habit, keep a goblet shape, allowing plenty of airflow around the base of the plant and in the middle. It also makes picking the fruit easier. Red currants are one of the earliest harvesting fruits, but looking at the buds, the blossom looks a few weeks away still. And at the end of the fruit cage I have a couple more gooseberry bushes. I've pruned these quite extensively to allow a greater gap between the bushes to make it easier to walk around and pick the fruit. Much of my work over the last few weeks has been extending the fruit cage. It probably took 2 half-days to complete it. It was a good time to do it because the ground was nice and soft. These steel poles are about 2.5 meters in length with 50 centimeters buried into the ground, and knocking them into the ground is much easier when the ground is soft. I have made a video on how to make a fruit cage like this, and I'll link to that here. One of the reasons why I wanted to extend the fruit cage was to provide a much stronger support system. This bush here is my tayberry bush, and when it's in leaf it really catches the wind, and I've had problems over the last few years with whatever support system I put in place simply wasn't strong enough for it. But now what I've done is to use strong wire tied to the support frame of the fruit cage, and the wire is relatively taut, and I am confident the frame will be strong enough to protect the canes from the worst of the weather. This is an example of the wind damage caused to the previous type of poles I used. I'd even resorted to tying in multiple poles together using wire, but the wind rock simply sheared away and folded the canes near ground level. They were simply nowhere near strong enough. I've strung wire all the way across the length of the frame. If I just pan round here, that may or may not be coming out on the camera, but that's about 8 meters length from one side to the other. And the wire I've put in at 3 levels. A low one here which is about 40 centimeters high. A second one slightly higher up, probably around at 0.5 meters high. Then a third one at this level here, which is probably 1.50 meters in height. And using those different levels I've been able to support the canes into a fan shape, and I've simply used twine to tie in the canes to the wire. Along from my tayberry plant I have my loganberry plant. Now loganberries are less fun to tie in than tayberries. Tayberries are spine free, but the same can't be said for loganberries. At least my loganberry bush, that is. There are these spines all the way along the canes, which can make it a little painful tying them in. But I followed the same approach, tying the canes up into a fan shape. It's easier to see around the base of the loganberry bush. What I've done is to put a mulch of well-rotted manure all around the circumference of the plant, which will act as its feed for this year. And next to the loganberry, I have over here my boysenberry plant. I planted this about a year ago. Like tayberry, the canes are spine free, but best of all it produces a fruit similar in taste to a blackberry crossed with a raspberry. It's a really delicious fruit, and given the number of canes on the plant, I'm hopeful of quite a good harvest this year, provided I can keep the birds off. Which leaves the final row on the plot, which is my row of raspberry canes. Now these are summer fruiting raspberries. Summer fruiting raspberries are delicious, but they do require a great deal of patience, because it takes almost 2 years to get a harvest. Planting the canes in the winter of year 1, it takes the whole summer for them to mature, and they really don't provide any fruit that year. And then in the second year, the canes will look like this. What I have found with raspberries is that because they grow tall and upright without much leaf cover, weeding is a constant challenge along its base. Now I've thrown some well-rotted manure around the base of the plants to give them a feed. But the other problem, apart from constant weeding, is that here the ground is very dry, and there can be several weeks where it doesn't really rain and the sun is baking down on the ground. What I'm thinking to do as an experiment is to put straw down around the base of the plants. A similar idea to strawberries, but this time not to keep the fruit clean, but to keep the sun off the bare earth, baking and drying it out. Hopefully that way the roots will have more moisture around them and the fruit will be bigger. I just need to find a supplier to source the straw from. One of my resolutions this year is to grow more flowers, both down here on the plot and at home. This area here was occupied by a globe artichoke plant that produced gorgeous purple flowers, almost punk-like with sticky up hairs. I really enjoyed looking at them, and I don't want to lose that. So the space where they were, this circular bed here, I've come down and planted some more flowers. I'm going to plant a couple of varieties. The first is a cosmos that hopefully will look like that, and out of the packet it resembles something close to a dahlia, so I'll pop that in the soil a little below the surface, or maybe actually the very tip just poking through the surface. And the second flower I'm going to plant are these. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but crocosmia. I really like the look of the colour of the flowers, but sometimes the colour on the box is a little unreliable. And these are very much more like bulbs, and they get planted about 10 centimetres below the surface. What I'm going to do is dig over the ground, put them in the soil, and keep the area weed free until they establish themselves. And that's it. That's all the flowers in. Now all I need to do is to keep it weed free and see what happens. I'm not going to water the bulbs in. It's probably going to rain later today and the soil is already nice and moist. And that leaves the polytunnel currently empty of plants, but I have cleared space on the table. And what I hope to do over the next few weeks is to use the polytunnel to harden off the plants, either that will end up growing inside the polytunnel like the tomatoes or chilies, or plants like petunias for my hanging baskets, or even peas, beans, cabbages, courgettes, runner beans and French beans that need a little time to harden off and protect from frost before planting outside. Inside I've started to germinate plants that need a long growing season, like tomatoes, chilies, and some flowers. I've started with tomatoes and chilies because they are slow growing vegetables. The advantage of starting early is that by the end of June in a good year, I should be harvesting my first tomatoes. Chilies probably take a little bit longer. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this month's allotment tour. Please let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment. And if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel in the usual way.